Whatever you want. Hey, how are you?
I'm well. Good to see you.
Thank you so much for being here today.
My pleasure.
I really, really
I was going to
appreciate
say
it.
it's a major hardship. You look out there, you're going, oh.
Yeah, next time I think we're going to have to turn the cameras around and put that in the background. It is here on the beach. It's quite something. So welcome to Cannes. Welcome to the MasterCard Villa. Welcome to our AI for brand marketers sort of thing. You and I had a dry run last week.
We did, 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. And we talked all about your vision for AI, and I think this is a perfect place to do that again, and then maybe a little more detail.
Okay. Are you asking questions, or do I just have to go?
First of all, I'll ask you any question you'd like, but I thought, you could just tell me how you're feeling.
Well, the paint dry anecdote was pretty funny.
Thank you. They don't always laugh at the stuff that I say. I know they think it's funny, but they don't actually laugh. And I'm wondering if that's my whole comic timing thing, or maybe we'll talk about that later.
I would narrow the aperture just a little bit, right? And so, if you say AI in our business, I think if you say AI in any of our businesses, we've been using machine learning and AI in the parts of our business that are very data intensive for a while, right? So we've been doing analytics and probabilistic modeling and pattern recognition inside of, you were just talking about identifying the right audiences and segments and getting our messages in front of people. So I think I'm going to put that aside and say that what's happening now around Gen AI is the interesting bit, and how it impacts the content and creative side of our business, right? Fair?
Fair.
Okay. And you're a braver man than I, because I wouldn't choose the backsplash or shoes. But if I think about how we're beginning to use AI in those parts of the business, I think I'd probably narrow it down to maybe 3 or 4 big buckets, and then maybe we should also talk a bit about some of the potential shortfalls or the things we should be on the lookout for. But initially, I'd say that there is, as you were saying, 32%. There's a lot that we do, even given the nature of the work that we do, that is repetitive, rote, that even in intellectual labor is clearly easy to automate. So when I think about personalization at scale, the mass of messaging that we need to generate, we're definitely using it, and we've actually just announced a big partnership with Adobe to incorporate their Gen AI Studio into our entire stack, from the data piece all the way through the audience definition pieces to then how we generate content and how we then understand whether it's working, as you said. So there's a big piece around that where we're making quite a bit of progress. I think another way we're using the tool is to ideate better, to ideate faster, to sort of come up with better hypotheses, or to get more surface area of ideas for our expert creative teams to actually be able to sift through and get to better stuff faster, right?
Is that through models, the foundational models from the outside world? Is this through wrappers on top of it, stuff you've done?
It's both, right? And so, for example, it's often through foundational models, but we created a large language model recently for a healthcare client. It was really interesting because we wanted to teach an AI that was specific to us and to this client to write memoirs. And the reason we wanted to do that is because we wanted to create a tool that families who have an older relative who is somewhere in the Alzheimer's continuum could actually have a resource that would bring everybody together and give them a tool so that they could all participate in the recreating or the sharing of that individual's memories. And it's become this really, really powerful one-off. So it's both. You clearly build it off a foundational model, but then you create bespoke kind of instances that solve for a specific problem.
So I think mostly every one of our clients is now doing what we either call point solutions or function solutions, where you take a very specific thing that you really well understand and you automate it to the level that it can be automated, especially if it's executional. It can be done extremely well. What I find fascinating, though, is some of the work that's happening at IPG, that I'm aware of anyway, is you're taking people who are, in every definition of the word, subject matter experts, and they are using these tools for true ideation. And I've talked to several creatives over the last couple weeks, knowing that you and I were going to have this conversation today, about that experience. Like, what is that, right? Now, I use it that way too, and I've been using it that way for, to be fair, years, but I have a very specific way that I approach it, because I'm using it as a kind of a foil sounding board partner. I'll say something to it like, I write, I don't know, 300 to 500 words every day, about 4,000 words a week, and I tend to use the phrase "that said," comma, way too many times. And so I'll say this like ChatGPT or Meta AI or Claude or whatever thing I have open, or sometimes I'll say in our own playground, which has several of these open at a time, it's like, I can't say "that said" one more time or I'm going to kill myself. It's so hackneyed and terrifying. I suck. Give me 5 examples, other things. And you know, I play with it, and if you're snarky to it, it's snarky back. Yep. You know, so you have like a little snarky moment with, some large language model, and it, tells you use the word "however." It's like, no, however is not that. It's like, it doesn't know, but you're just having a pattern matching convo. A lot of the people that are on your various teams and I we're comparing notes about how that feels. Do you have guidelines, or how do you how does that work in your world?
No, I think we're still early enough. Everybody is encouraged, if not compelled, to incorporate it into their day-to-day, and some of our agencies or leaders are better at ensuring that folks are, in fact, using the tools so that they can learn and so they can figure out what their rhythm is going to be and how they're going to engage with it. But I don't know that I'd tell you we have guidelines as yet. And then it's funny, because Raja, the question that you were asking earlier, when I think about, as I said, personalization at scale and the ways in which optimizing the AI is clearly a big part of it, ideating is another big part of it. And then a third part is what I sort of call raising the floor, and that was that idea that you democratize and distribute creativity to audiences that you might not have access to it. And so the one example that I would love to show, and it's funny because we actually did it it's about a year old, because it made some noise here in Cannes last year, but one of our clients, it's a global client, they're based out of Latin America, actually out of my home in Mexico. They're the largest baked goods company in the world, Grupo Bimbo. And if you guys have that video, we did some really interesting work with them that unlocks how you use the tools, how you think about empowering an audience that would otherwise not have access to creativity at a certain level, and how to build business with it. So if we could just take a quick look.
Welcome to Mexico, home of the world's most creative hot dogs and hamburgers. Yes, hot dogs and hamburgers.
El camarones y la fresa también. Queso manchego, una capa de chapulines.
You wouldn't know it though, because despite their innovative ingredients, few have access to innovative marketing to grow their business. Which means more people choose the big chains instead. So how does the country's largest supplier of buns support thousands of vendors when each one is unique?
Regrese y me diga, cuando eres tan rica. Eso sí me hace sentir bien.
By combining Mexico's long tradition of sign painting with the scale and efficiency of generative AI. Introducing the greatest guide to hochos and hamburguesas. The world's first generative search and signage system for the world's most creative hot dogs and hamburgers. We started by collecting data, mucho data, including location, stamp name, and signature recipe. And because emerging generative AI is miraculous, but hard to control at scale,
Ay, caramba!
we created a world-first workflow designed to turn data into prompts, and prompts into food paintings. that are masked, combined with generative backgrounds, dynamically typeset from one of our 6 hand-painted fonts, automatically retouched, branded, then ingested into our system as separate layers to be combined, up-resed, and output to more than 42,000 unique signs, delivered to each vendor using WhatsApp. It all came together on The Greatest Guide, a comprehensive map to the world's best hot dogs and hamburgers. Find one nearby, see what's on the menu, then head on over, making this unforgettable food totally unmissable.
Momento en que mi línea se hace hasta allá, por supuesto. Estos cocheros son mis gallos. No, lo que me pagan es cuando te dicen, ¿sabes qué? Está chingona tu chingadera.
We unlock the power of big tech for small business and put Mexico's most creative hot dogs and hamburgers
Con el sabor de la fresa es
Trupel on the map.
That is awesome. That is just...
And we were on the same wavelength, because you asked the question, and I went, wow, that's good, because I've got something that we did not
Didn't rehearse that.
coordinate or rehearse.
yeah.
Exactly.
That's just outstanding. And that's a few months old now. So
About a year, about
it's a year old.
about 13 months old.
All right, so it's even more cool now.
All right, we'll take it.
I got to say, and I don't usually blow smoke, so this is not smoke being blown. That's really early as a year ago. I mean, that capability set's really early, so kudos to you guys.
Well, but it goes to your question about, I wish that everybody across our organization was that curious, was that early an adopter, was that, and what you find, I think, as with, I'm sure, all of our organizations, is that, there are people who are curious, there are people who are threatened, there are people who think slightly outside the box, and then all of a sudden you get something like this. And it's just, we're trying to keep after everybody. We do, as I said, we make it an expectation that people will be incorporating it into their day-to-day. And then, the extent to which that then actually gets sort of followed up on by leadership varies.
Seeing that and having lived this several times, I wondered how you dealt with when the vendor went, my hamburger doesn't look right.
I didn't ask that exact question, but there was basically the equivalent of, as soon as we went into this, and as you say, you get point solutions, then you get applications, like with any sort of general purpose technology, and eventually we'll have, systems solutions. It's like, we won't have EVs everywhere unless we actually have EV chargers everywhere. Right. But what we ended up with is a little customer service group inside the agency in Mexico City that was actually fielding the kinds of questions you just asked.
Yeah, of course. So that happened in a market where what I would call a lower risk market. It probably isn't true, but when you go to a stateside and you go into a big corporation and you start to deal with the legal compliance, security, risk managers, and their favorite word is no, and they all say it well, and they're extremely good at it. How are you guys dealing with that? Like, how are you dealing with the, fear, uncertainty, and doubt?
Well, look, I think, the risks are real. I guess they come in a couple of buckets from where I sit. I mean, we clearly have a responsibility with all of our clients to be careful, as careful as can possibly be the case, knowing that we've got results that we're on the, we have to deliver with their reputation and their brands. And so I'd say there's how do you approach guidelines? What will you and won't you do? So I don't know that you want to cross the line in certain formats, right? If it's the cabinetry or the tiles, if it's super personalized messages in essence, ways that are more tactical. But when you're communicating with consumers at a certain level, I think you do want to ask yourself whether authenticity. So I'll give you an example of something that pivoted for us, which is interesting. And it's in Canada, we have a client that has a pretty sizable business, and they curate travel for people of color leaving Canada who want to have interesting experiences around the world. We started using AI with them to go upstream, so it wasn't just that basic, and it was maybe a version of what we just showed, but it was happening across digital channels, and it was essentially to take images that they'd shared or images that we have and project the traveler into new potential destinations, which we knew made sense for them based on certain things they had shared in a permissioned way with us. A really disturbing thing started to happen, which is that the algorithms decided that these people didn't belong in the foreground of the scene, right? So all of a sudden, instead of putting the person who,
Yikes.
don't worry about it. It'll either be okay or not now or 3 minutes from now. Thank you. Instead of putting the protagonist in the scene, the protagonist was opening the door of the hotel.
God.
Or because we were essentially asking, and we caught this obviously before it went live because we look at these things very carefully. I mean, it did some pretty awful things. It lightened people's skins. It did. And so what we did is we pivoted and we said to the client, obviously not ready, but why don't we use it as an opportunity? And why don't we build an app and invite all of the folks who are already in your franchise, all of your customers, to report instances in which they see what is essentially happening on the web, which is the training data that's being used, so that we can begin to build an LLM for you where we can do this in a year's time. And I think we're up to like 6,000 or 8,000 inbound reports from consumers that are helping us help them actually realize the promise of the technology.
So this is really important. What I opened up with this morning, I was talking about evals, annotation, and classification. This is precisely like those 7,000 reports. It's exactly the kind of annotation you need. And then someone's got to look at it and determine if it meets the eval, because otherwise that report is useless, right? You've got to do your homework on that stuff.
I mean, little known fact, just because we're all, it's Monday, we're all here, we need to kind of come to con with this, with the right. You were saying we use it, you use it inside your company, people write better emails. Do people know what the largest data set that was used to train most of the major models up until, I think, like GPT-3 or 3.5 on emails were? It was the email database from Enron.
Yeah.
Because it was publicly available, it was free, and it was this massive, so it did learn to write business emails, but it might also have this sort of slight where, like, you might want to double check, right?
Garbage in, garbage out.
Or ethically,
Ethically questionable in, ethically questionable out. Is that a different version of GEICO? It might be. Yeah, look, you can only be as good as your training sets. And I love to show a picture, which I don't have here queued up, but I love to show a picture of AI bias is real. And in this image, I ask for a fan with smartphone watching football. And what you get is 4 white guys with close-cropped hair in bomber jackets watching soccer. Now, I'm an American. Football is not soccer. To many people here in France, football is soccer, but that's a whole other thing. The model wasn't asked, show me a biracial or interracial or representative, whatever. I simply asked, fan with smartphone watching football. And the bias, you wouldn't know the model was biased if you asked for a normal thing. And looking at the image, you'd never think it was a biased image, and yet it was one of the most highly biased images ever produced. mostly because I gave it the opportunity to be, but I wanted the model to show its bias. And you need to multiply that across the entirety of the foundational model sets. And then what they do is they fine-tune their way out of it. And the model drifts and you break something else. So this is not like it's going to happen. We're minutes away, maybe, I don't know, if it's a year or 2 years, it's 5 minutes or never, I don't know, but this has to be solved. And kudos to you guys for A, recognizing it, and B, jumping on it, because I think everybody needs to be far more aware of that than they are right now. These models, every single thing they're trained on worldwide. By the way, the #1 translation tool that was used while we're doing like little trivia for model training, anybody want to take a guess at what document might be translated into more different languages than any other document ever written in the history of the world? Yes, the KJ, the King James Bible. In every language. I don't know if you guys have read that cover to cover, but it maybe doesn't have all of our modern ethics described in detail. I'm just saying it might. I mean, you know, so yeah, some of this is in the model, and models, not model, models. So yeah. What's the future look like to you? You know, the world is, you got streaming going on. You got all kinds of like, the whole world is basically changed dramatically since 2 weeks ago when we sat down. How you thinking about the future from, you know, running the organization you run, which is huge and awesome?
I thought we were talking about something easy like AI.
Well, in the context of AI, you could narrow it down to the context of AI. If you'd
Look,
like.
I mean, it's funny. I did bring one other piece of work because I figured better than just listening to people talk. So if we're we can take the task portion of things and make it much more efficient and free up time for people to do higher order thinking. And if we use it to ideate, and if we distribute creativity with it and raise the floor, the thing that I'm excited about is where you take the combination and where you can sort of have an idea that is a hybrid because it wouldn't be something you could bring to life without tech and AI. So if, you know, we'll run one other idea, not the same one.
I think you're hearing more about the trials and tribulations of a lot of athletes now. I was winning pretty much everything, but still it felt a little bit empty. That's part of why I was looking for something different, you know, enjoy the moment a little bit.
Now on the court, John McEnroe.
You cannot be serious! Get away from me!
Welcome to Michelob Ultra, McEnroe versus McEnroe, one of the most exciting moments in the history of tennis.
On one side, John McEnroe playing on a real tennis court.
On the other side, virtual John McEnroe.
Ready to face yourself? Whoa, okay.
You've got a physically transparent screen, which John can play a ball to, and the ball will pass through that.
Bring it on, man. Let's do this. How the hell did they do this?
Sound of a brand new thing. Time to show 'em what we gon' bring. Time to show 'em what they missing. And when they know that we gon' say cha-ching.
After analysing every single match in John's career, each avatar was programmed with adaptive artificial intelligence.
That connected seamlessly to an intricate reactive robot system. 3 pieces of tech that think and play just like John.
You cannot be serious!
Imagination. Imagination. Brand new creation.
And then it started out with this one thing.
Imagination. Imagination. Brand new creation.
But it's gotta start with this one thing.
Is that the best you got? Hang on, hold my beer.
Unbelievable. That is just spectacular.
And what's, you know, I guess what's interesting is that without AI, you know, I don't think the idea is going to not be interesting for an algorithm, but without AI to allow us to do we've had the cannons or the ways to simulate, but we didn't have something that could simulate how he would have played. And so there's an instance where you said, what's the future look like? It's, how can we elevate the use of this as a tool to actually articulate what are still big platform ideas? So there you are.
I think that's a mic drop moment. That's outstanding. Does anyone have any questions for Philippe? Anybody? Yes, sir.
I take a look at that work, and you said something interesting about the teams, those that are curious and openly embracing it versus the fearful. Because I see it across, I'm in the entertainment industry, and I see it literally every day, and Shelly and I talked about this earlier. How has the utilization of these tools changed the culture of where you are and the teams?
I mean, to be brutally frank with you, I think it's too early for me to answer that question. It's happening so fast. Across, I think, any organization, you've got people who are more or less likely to embrace change. But I think it'll triage itself. I think we'll definitely see people who learn it and raise their hands. And, we're investing a lot in making sure people have access to the training. But right now, I can't answer the question and have it be other than a very vague sense. So, check back. I mean, a year from now, I'll have much better data.
Brutal honesty. Yes, ma'am. Oh, one here.
Somebody asking?
No, go ahead. Raj, it's you.
Okay. So, firstly, Philippe, I think fantastic work. Both ones which you have shown, they are really, really amazing. And, we feel very privileged to have this partnership, with your company, with your group. So firstly, that point. Secondly, one question and one comment. We hear a lot of stuff around creativity, not necessarily the original creativity for breakthrough, but for all practical purposes, the creativity of the sorts which is used in advertising can easily be done by AI. And some of the creative people that I have been speaking with were a little worried and scared. What's your take on that is one point. The second thing is, if you can answer that, I'll just ask the second one.
Sure. Look, Shelly's the person to ask about what the technology may be able to do in time, and it's moving very, very fast, faster than any of us anticipated. Right now, I would say that what AI can do is derivative original content, because it's original content based on a set of inputs, that are still, because it's drawing them from a fairly big, from the internet, from a big data sets. We haven't refined it to where it's doing things that are as well informed as they need to be about a business, your business. So I think there'll be a bit of a shakeout. I think there'll be young creators who are very, very adept, who will be able to show us how to do amazing things. I think there are people who are very, very high-end craftspeople, and who, are terrific storytellers and will use the tool. And I think for some people stuck in the middle, I think that's where you sense that nervousness.
Yeah, the reason why I was today morning, as well, I was mentioning, I used to write very good poems. That used to be one of my passions, and I would love writing those. But now I feel like a fool, because the damn thing writes in 2 minutes much better than what I could write. It's a disintermediation of one of my passions, which I'm upset about. But having said that, I can empathize with the creatives. And I'm one of the early adopters of AI in my own mind. So anyway, that's the reason why I was asking that question as to what the practical implications could be. The second one I wanted to ask you is, in the world of sound, and you know that we are very, very big into sonic.
You guys do a lot.
In fact, Cheryl, who is here, her team has created the sonic station. And it is scary how beautifully the music is created instantaneously in a matter of few moments, where you say, this is the sonic melody of MasterCard, this is the context, this is the audience, now create something. The damn thing does so well. And it's becoming very difficult as to what is derived creativity and what is original creativity. And I may not care much about it as an advertiser and a marketer, unless it is, if there is any risk of plagiarism, yes. But otherwise, it seems to be fascinating. I don't know what the question is, but I just thought I'll share that thought.
I'd say yes. Look, it's funny, right? Because I think that there's clearly the concern you raise around things like plagiarism. There is, to my mind, the fact that I think there are places we probably don't want to go. I don't think we want to have AI generating human beings, right? Because, and I think the trust that major companies and major brands have built up over time is something which, if we're not thoughtful and careful about how we handle this technology, is potentially kind of meaningfully at risk. And not knowing, I can see though, when you talk about the poetry, things that are highly personalized though, I'm not sure that even though it does them in a way that are gonna be, so like, I don't know that, could it, do you think AI could create documentary films, right? Because it does come with do you think it could understand how we like certain things, certain gaps to be left for us to fill in the storytelling? Do you like, so I mean, I think it will depend. And then I do think that it goes so fast in terms of like the risk piece of it, which is why I think for a good long time, Shelly was talking about it earlier, it's gonna need a lot of monitoring, is, with social media, information moves so fast at no cost that then disinformation, which Gen AI is clearly going to be creating a lot of, is going to move so fast also at no cost. So I think that those are going to be part of the guardrails that we need to be really, really cognizant of, and we'll push it and we'll see how far it goes and where it takes us or doesn't. But I think we're all in an early stage and still learning, definitely.
We are out of time, which is really sad because I would have this conversation all day. To throw in my 2 cents, creativity is magic. I don't have a better word for it. I've been writing music since I was 4 years old. I have 5,000 pieces of music in my ASCAP catalog, and I can tell you right now that the stuff that's made me the most money and been the most fulfilling, I felt I discovered that I didn't write, that the notes just happened and the things just happened. And I would run around the studio going, have I heard this before? Have you heard this before? Like, what did I do? At the end of the day, that's a human thing. Executing is not a human thing. Executing is a method thing. You want to arrange this now, this melody should sound like reggae. This is going to sound like hip hop. This is going to sound like big band or swing. Those are rule-based. Another word for rules is algorithms. And things that are great at algorithms are AI models. They're great at it. And so as people, we need to separate out what is it that people do versus what is it that people actually execute. What is the human magic and what is the executional excellence that is sometimes deeply confused for creativity? We've raised our kids. There's kids coming out of Juilliard today can play notes that I could never play, at a skill level I could never do. The athletes coming out today can do athletics at levels that could never be done a generation ago. And in our society, we've somehow confused this technical proficiency with creativity. They're not the same thing. Play a long, slow note with some emotion and blow my mind and make me feel what you feel. Not 500 notes that are technically perfect but don't mean anything. And so, do we teach this in school? Do we have critical listening? Do we have people who are well enough educated to know the difference? That's the danger of AI, that we have a society that's not well enough educated to know the difference between homogeneous mediocrity and heterogeneous creativity. And that's my own bias on this subject. We're going to talk to Duncan Crabtree Ireland, the chief negotiator from SAG, about an hour from now here on this stage. And we're going to talk deeply about what the Screen Actors Guild went on strike for, what they are fighting for, what they really feel actors bring, extras bring, real human beings bring to a production. And I think you'll be fascinated by the not only the discussion, but the idea, are we replaceable? I don't know. Ladies and gentlemen, Philippe Krakowsky, thank you so very, very much. Truly appreciate it.